And offer the Greens support for the bill at this stage to enable this conversation to happen. And I've been interested in the debate so far today. I think it has been constructive. I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, the case that triggered the introduction of this bill, and the appalling and quite heart-wrenching situation for a woman in Invercargill whose rapist moved in next door, which highlighted for us several areas for legislative review and policy and funding change. This woman actually had an indefinite protection and order in place, apparently, but it didn't prevent her abuser moving in next door. The police had been for a chat and suggested he moved, but stated they couldn't do anything else unless he breached the order and crossed that line. And in this situation, his friends had been threatening and harassing her as well, but this too did not constitute a breach. It is quite strange that the case that has triggered the introduction of this bill will actually do nothing to solve that actual situation, because the perpetrator in that instance had only been sentenced for a crime for 4 years, so it hadn't reached the threshold required in this bill. The Greens have several concerns related to this bill that we are keen to explore through the Select Committee process, while acknowledging that there is a real problem that exists at the moment. The concerns we have, as have been raised by Labour, are the requirement for the victim to apply and pay for the order, rather than the state taking responsibility for the safety of victims. The situation for people in small towns where it may not be so easy to be able to define their place of living in the same place, and also the possibility that this may kind of create in a larger city, create a perverse result of enabling abusers to have free reign of a city outside one specific area, and the potential that this actually may lock victims in to quite a prescribed safety zone that may be I think, quite a perverse result if it creates this safety zone for victims that they then become locked into. That's certainly not something what we would want to see happen. So we're very keen to have the Select Committee for victims and their advocates to present to the Select Committee process to ensure that we are adequately informed on these issues. But I do want to now speak to some of the wider issues that there's been a lot of discussion around the importance of focusing on victims and, the terrible situation of victims being in a situation of being so closely engaged with their abuser. And I want to remind this House of what I believe is a completely tragic reality, that only 1 in 100 victims get justice in this country. That research shows us that only 7 victims out of 100 report the abuse. So we know that at the moment, because of this situation, the lack of action that's been taken to take action around sexual abuse, that most victims are actually on a daily, if not a regular basis, if not daily basis, having to interact with their abuser because of the failure of this House and this system to actually provide them with a system that they can access justice. Of those 7 out of 100 cases that are reported, only 3 go to court and only 1 result in a conviction. That is appalling. 1 in 100 victims in this country access justice. And so those of that 1 in 100 who have a offender is sentenced to over 5 years will now be able to access this protection. That is not a victim focus. And any pretense that it is actually covering up what I believe is a massive injustice in this country. I also would just like to speak to the fact that that those that have been convicted, that Kim McGregor from the Rape Prevention Network has noted numerous instances.
Sorry to interrupt the member, her time has expired. I call Paul Foster Bell.